what I heard in Olufemi's paper is that the dissent among various Baptists, historically and into the present day, is a response to internal pressures and internal disagreements, but that the doubling itself in the end becomes productive because there's a multiplication of Baptists, and the Baptists in the United States grew to such an extent, of course, that they could fuel the civil rights movement. So there's something about doubling as a response to disjunction and sort of problematic history or history of trauma that then becomes productive. And Danelle, I think that's very apparent in your paper too, not to over-psychologize Basquiat's personal life, because you're not trying to do just a psychoanalytical study, but clearly he was feeling an internal disjunction within himself. And one way I think you were arguing that he was maintaining some kind of controlling competence over that was to create this relationship with Samedi through his artwork. And so that was a kind of doubling that ended up being productive for him. And then leading to a kind of transcendence as well, with a force, a power that is otherwise invisible. And of course, we're talking about transatlantic, the Black Atlantic diaspora culture, so perhaps it's no coincidence that we see these themes cutting across the papers. And you also mentioned about how other practitioners can become Loa too. So they then enter the other side through this kind of doubling. And I thought the final two papers, Linda's paper and Zoe's paper, speak also to the challenges that come from that attempt of doubling. So Linda, you were talking, of course, about apartheid, which is a kind of negative sort of doubling. There was a separation. But then how did, and I think it's important to mention that, Linda had in mind the Cape Colored community who call themselves with this term. This is their own term for themselves, a community who trace descent from South Asian, Southeast Asian, African, and European populations in the past. But what they have done then in response today after apartheid is to create another sort of doubling. They feel like their former, in a sense, safe haven and control over their church community, perhaps losing a bit of that. And so what are they doing? They're going to indigenous African ritual practices and performances, which are not exclusively their source of identity, right? So this kind of doubling there in order to reassert a community, a sense of community coherence. And I think that was also clear in Zoe's paper, where confronted with the impossibility or real challenges of becoming affluent and successful in the terms of Christianity because of that colonial doubling and the illegality of Obeah enforced by colonial regimes. Now this doubling is coming to the fore. So people are bringing it publicly. The doubling is no longer secret. People are wearing guard rings, bringing them into YouTube videos. So and through dance hall. So it seemed in a way that Olufemi is saying the church itself is a source of this kind of productive doubling, that Vodou and its artistic representation for Basquiat was for Danelle, and that the practice of enculturation in South Africa for the Cape Colored community, Moravians, and the use of guard rings. And I think what is productive about this, to use Zoe's expression of holding the line, what was the expression you used? Drawing the line?
Can you draw the line where on one hand this stuff is it's okay, it's our African heritage, and then on the other it's double worship and it's evil. Like, where do we draw the line? That was the question, where to draw the line.
And the way in that ambiguity kind of lies some subversive power.
Yeah.
And so maintaining that doubling sort of across the board. Well, thank you for some great papers. And any questions from any of you?
I have a lot of questions for all of you guys. Great presentations. It's great hearing all the thoughts from you guys. Zoe, great presentation. I think the genre is super cool. I was wondering, since there's like a trap dance hall, is there a dialogue between like American trap artists, or did these trap dancehall artists kind of just like hear themes from trap music and take it as it goes?
Yeah, most definitely. There's definitely an intersection with, and it's inspired and influenced by American trap dance artists. And we see oftentimes an intersection
Okay.
and an overlap. So yes.
Okay. And the way you talked about it, it sounded like these Obeah specialists are part of like the older generation, and I was wondering if these new, more open and avowed Obeah, I guess, partakers are becoming specialists now, or if they're kind of just relying and taking Obeah in from like the older generations.
Yeah, but definitely, from what I'm seeing right now, it almost seems like there's an inheritance of your family is a part of this tradition, you might inherit it. And one of the things that was striking from my research is, I guess I was almost, when I was evaluating Obeah specialists, I kind of had the expectation for them to look a certain type of way, like, like your traditional kind of, look. And then I recently, an Obeah specialist by a dance hall artist, she alleged to be her Obeah specialist, he came out and kind of did an entire tell-all. And this was a young man, I guess, it was 40 young. He lives in Atlanta. He, as a part of the Atlanta scene, he just looks like someone we're just familiar with. He's just a kind of figure that looks like what we're familiar with. He lives in a house that, we've seen time and time again. He talks like we do, like us. So definitely I would say that there is a kind of younger generation of specialists, and they look like us. It's not what I guess what we would necessarily expect. So yeah, he's close ties to the music and pop industry. He's a musical artist himself, and so yeah, definitely there is a younger generation.
Can I ask one more? I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if it was intentional. The screenshot with the guard ring that was the Star of David. I was wondering if that was intentional by whoever made the ring, or if it was just a random aesthetic design choice. If you had any information on that.
From my research, I would say it definitely is intentional because there is a lot of intersection conversations with other spiritual traditions and religious traditions. Obeah is it's eclectic, so it's encompassing different with kind of globalization. It's encompassing all carrying and drawing from all different spiritual and religious traditions. So it's on one hand Jamaica's African heritage, but then on the other hand, from coming to the island and being around, surrounded by different groups and traditions, a lot of that's being able to incorporate. So it's definitely multidimensional.
Hey, I'm jumping in only because I wanted to follow up on that. Thank you all very much. So Zoe, I'll stick with you, and then I'm gonna move. I also I noticed the Star of David on the guard ring, and was going to ask you how frequent that was. I know that in Haitian Vodou, so not in a sort of profoundly globalist moment of the contemporary moment, but for hundreds of years in Vodou, the figure of the Jew is a profoundly important anti-Christian symbol, right? That there are really subversive moments in the season of Lent for rah-rah bands to even make, effigies of Jews and seek them out. And so there's a certain way in which it's not, I wonder if it's not just drawing eclectically, but a really intentional, claiming what enslaved people see as anti-Christian power or oppositional to Christian domination.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that I would love to explore more.
It would just be interesting to know how often,
yeah,
Jewish symbology comes into Obeah.
And from what I've seen, it's I guess a lot of different symbologies come in, but Jude, it does come in quite frequently, and with several of the people that I interviewed, I almost, sometimes I'm like, are you talking about, sometimes you just kind of wonder, are you talking about Judaism, or are you talking about Christianity, because it's just incorporating all of these different themes. So it is a very common occurrence, and sometimes spiritual texts that they will reference. So one of the things that I've noticed is like the Bible, like biblical text. There will be certain like psalms that you would repeat in Obeah practice. Like one of my interlocutors was sharing a story where someone advised them or advised a friend in order to win a court case. On your way to the court case, you're repeating like psalms. So the psalms are like, "You shall be deaf, you shall be mute," and kind of repeating and reiterating those psalms on your way to your court case. So that definitely is an example of how those themes emerge and what is considered Obeah practice. So this utilization of like the biblical or the Tanakh, like these texts, as a form of Obeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a comment, not a question. Okay, Danelle. So this is a simple like historical question. I think I'm fascinated. I'm wondering if you know much about how Basquiat came into contact with Haitian Vodou, and I ask only because, so Gede, the figure of Gede, which is not quite Samedi, right? Like fertility, death, all of these things, is a much more frequent loi to show up in Haitian Vodou in Haiti. But of course across the 20th century, after the marine occupation of Haiti and then films, Samedi seems to get or to show up a lot more and float across a lot of U.S. media. And I'm just wondering if you have any sense for when and in what forms he interacted with Haitian Vodou. There were Vodou dancers in the background of the video,
Yes, exactly.
right? They were serving there.
Well, it seems like it was pretty little. His father was an accountant and a good Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I put that in quotations.
Every practitioner's a good Catholic.
Right. So when we read, because people have asked that, just why is he so interested in this? It wasn't through his father. Now, what some have conjectured is that his mother may have taken him to botanicas.
Mm-hmm.
He might have been exposed to that, but through her. They had a very problematic relationship. That's a whole nother paper. She suffered from mental illness. He was hit by a car when he was 7, and they say that's because she wasn't really paying attention, and so he went to. Basically, the father took over him and his 2 sisters. She was institutionalized after that, and so.
Well, then it's his father, right? Like, surely that's...
Well...
Or is it film, or what?
Well, he ends up leaving home, running away from home at 16.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. If it was any exposure, it certainly wasn't formal.
Mm-hmm.
So
like James Bond.
right. Which James Bond was that one?
I don't know if that would quite fit in terms of line. That was,
That was quite some time ago. We're dating ourselves. But 40 is young. Thank you. So,
that was...
was that with Sean
Live and
Connery?
Let Die.
Yeah.
Which I don't have the year.
For those of you, he's discussing the James Bond film where a Buddha priestess, she has these powers, but she has to remain a virgin in order to predict your future properly, etc.
And there's a wild representation of
So
Samedi in that. It's 1973, so that would fit.
In the 70s, yeah. So, did he see that film? Who knows? He did travel to New Orleans once. He did go to Africa once with the Water Watts, another artist. So, I would say in a popular sense he certainly was, but to portray the Babel in that intimate way seems to me that there was perhaps something more profound going on that we may never know, because again, the stigma of participating in this type of religious practice was certainly in the early 80s still there.
Yeah, a couple questions to bring the other two. And Mr. Abimbola, why are there so many Nigerian, particularly Yoruba, Baptists in Texas? It's coincidental. There's some kind of religious, historical reason behind it. And Ms. Howard, Dutch reform support apartheid, Moravians do not. Is there some kind of religious, historical reason or something why the two of them respond differently? I'm interested in this, both of the answers, but that's been nagging me about that Baptist in Texas.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me say the crop of people that are coming into Texas recently are the third or the fourth generations of the enslaved. And like I said, if you look at the background of the Yoruba people specifically, before the slave era at all, we have been advanced. Virtually everything that is being done or learned today that missionaries thought they brought to us were aware of it. Politically, economically, we've been into it. However, after the slave trade, the third, fourth generation saw the need to see the other part of the world, especially what we have received from the missionaries. I want to underscore this. The Black American, Afro-American missionaries with us, and the white missionaries that were with us, what we received after them, who were coming generations after them, started coming in back to the United States. One, for academic purposes. Secondly, for economic purposes. They decide to come in, integrate or immigrate, and after then, begin to re-Christianize Americans. And so we have so much of us there. Time did not permit me to go into the activities of the missionaries when they were down there, especially Jefferson Bowen. When he came, he saw that African, especially Nigerian, where he settled, we already have a concept of who God is, and we practice monotheism. He has that understanding that it was an error on the part of the Western world to feel that we are idolatry people, that we worship different gods. So when he saw that, he emphasized on it. And so our people knowing this now, we decided to emigrate over time. Not our early fathers who were here before, but some of us that were coming up after them started coming in and then felt the need that the Christianity they assume brought to us is not exactly the way it's supposed to be. So we started coming in and then started something new. So we were injecting something different into the order of worship of the main American Baptists, different from us. I can see that today many things are being even copied from us as to how to really inject it into the mode of worship.
I think you have the Dutch Reformed Church were pro-apartheid, and the Moravian Church was against apartheid.
Right. Did I turn it around?
You turned it
I'm
around.
sorry.
That's okay. I think it's just their doctrinal beliefs. The Moravian Church from the get-go was interested in how people were being treated. They wanted to treat people equally. And they were against slavery before it was popular, back in the 1700s. So I think it was more like how they viewed the religion and how it would help people and affect people in a positive manner. The Dutch Reformed Church was more interested in keeping the status quo. And the status quo at that time in South Africa was whites only, pro-government. So,
Is there something about their theology that lends them to that pro-apartheid stance?
they believe in like God is the church is all inclusive and people should just be treated the same. And there's no difference based on racial or ethnic differences. There's just everyone is the same.
forcibly segregated, would they still meet next to? Because like,
No, they couldn't. They would be thrown in prison.
yeah, but there's movements all through, at least like in the musical world, there's movements where white artists play with black artists and they evade police or they get thrown in jail and they come out and they do it again. And I wonder if this type of
I can only speak from my experience. Talking to Renee, she said that her mother and white Afrikaners who were Moravian would meet up in secret.
Yeah.
But it was always under the fear of being found out.
so sorry, so these like clandestine mixed racial meetings would happen, but they just weren't like the heads of the Moravian Church weren't like openly staging it, but there would be groups around where they would still do it. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, please. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Sorry, I have a question for Mr. Abimbola. I just want to know if there is a kind of relationship between the mission, the Baptist mission in Nigeria, and the present mission they have here in the United States. Is there a kind of relationship between them, and how does that look like?
Thank you very much. Like I said, I didn't get to that when we were talking about the Foreign Mission Board. The involvement of expansion of Christianity. The Americans, they have a mission board, Foreign Mission Board, that goes to Africa, other different part of the world, to establish Christianity. However, by the time they get to Nigeria, specifically in Lagos, First Baptist Church Lagos, where they establish and then we continue to grow. They have their main, where I want to say the headquarters of God is in Obeah, right? Where they went to, where we now have a seminary. The Southern Baptist Convention is the modern convention of the Nigeria Baptist Convention. So up to now, we still have our relationship, we still have our association. So, and that's the more reason, when I talk in terms of academics, the Southern Baptist Convention gives us more leverage, as Baptists from Nigeria to enter into America, do further studies, and possibly establish churches here, the local churches. And that's what really helped us also. Like I emphasized the Texas. In Texas, the community of Yoruba there, who has founded churches, have their own local convention that they call Joint Ethnic Baptist Convention of Texas. We call it JEPCOT. It's under the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas. Southern Baptist has different state conventions. So we're under the Texas Convention, which is a local Baptist. So straight to your question, our affiliation continues up to now. We bring people from America to Nigeria, then from America they still invite us from our other institutions to come over to the United States.
Just wonder, I was thinking of the theme of migration just very quickly, and I think, Olufemi, your paper obviously addresses that most directly. You have crossing geographical distances, but Danelle, I think you've got a paper that's crossing into the realm of the unseen, and Zoe across class lines, and obviously Linda across racial lines. Do you have any further thoughts about how the theme of migration ties into your work or illuminates it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I've not been able to really get into it. My approach the approach to this study is more historical. And that's why I have more time to go into the background. There are other things I still left out to have been able to say with respect to the enslavement, coupled with we coming in, and then diaspora today, those of us that are coming in today, our impact. I was unable to just get to that area that really informed the idea of a Yoruba community out here. So that's just my short on what I still try to look into that.
For me, I think the question of migration and the laws transforming themselves comes into the other professor's point, where Samedi he's a New World creation. But he's not the only god of the dead. He's the chief god, as I mentioned in my paper. But there's Balon Cimetière, which means he's at the cemetery and he's digging your grave and he's going to meet you upon your death. You have Balon Lacroix, he's the smooth talker. You have Balon Samedi, Balon Cimetière, Balon Lacroix, and we have, so you have the same loa in different manifestations, almost like what we would call today's multiverses, right? The Spider-Man who exists in different worlds with different skills and different responsibilities and duties. So, to me, the Haitian Vodou is adapting to the different issues that they're facing, and the loas adapt as well.
And for me, for migration, it ties into like many different dimensions of this project. I think on one hand, migration, as Professor Hellweg highlighted, crossing class lines and the boundaries of class. So migrating between the different boundaries of class. But as well, the theme of the genre in and of itself, your question on, does it have influences from American trap dancehall music? Dancehall itself is a very international genre. We have popular artists, dancehall artists in the United States who they reside in the United States, and dancehall, the genre itself is really borrowing from these different themes. So that on the genre of itself as well ties into the notion of migration, and a lot of dancehall artists are living in the United States. That is also another layer of migration.
You just got 2 minutes, Linda, but do you have a chance to?
Oh, okay. I think of migration in terms of my project as looking at how the church is now one church and everyone can attend and it's not divided on racial and ethnic lines. And I was very surprised to see white Afrikaners attending the church services and being so enthusiastic and zealous, and just very happy. And I always think about migration also as a lot of, I won't say a lot, but a significant number of white Afrikaners that were able to relocate outside of South Africa after apartheid ended, did so. Really because they thought South Africa was just going to go down the toilet when apartheid ended. And it's kind of hard in a way, I think, for some South Africans to understand that change has happened. Even now, there's still divisions in the society, in the culture, and it's going to take time. And I'm happy that the churches are inclusive for the most part, at least the Moravian Church. So I can't speak for the other churches.
Well, thank you all for attending, and please join me in thanking our panelists.